Is it doing it? Are we live? There we go. All right. Good evening, folks. Welcome back. We are live. This is, I don't even know what episode this is anymore. Flo Nicolas, AI lawyer. As you can see, she's an actual human being, not a generated AI lawyer. I tricked you all, everybody that's watching. I apologize. She's not a lawyer made of AI. She is an actual lawyer who has interests in AI. Flo, welcome to the show tonight. It's wonderful to have you.
Hey, thank you. It's a little past my bedtime, but that's all right. We'll get through it.
Wait a minute. You're in the same state as me. It's 8:30 at night. What do you?
I have three kids, so what can I say?
Nice. Well, welcome to the show. The vBrownBag co-hosts are Shala, myself, Roger, and Sean. We are in the IT tech space, coming from different angles. Shala is a cloud engineer. I'm an enterprise architect. Roger is in security and cloud, and Sean is in AI and infrastructure as code. And you and I met at the Women in AI conference in Portsmouth a couple of months ago. And it was a wonderful conversation. I loved listening to you and the other panelists chatting about the different things. And I was like, you are the first lawyer the first AI lawyer. I know that you don't like to position yourself as an AI lawyer. You are a lawyer who has interests in AI and is watching the scene closely. So I just wanted to have you on so that we could do a panel chat, just do a roundtable discussion of all of the things that are going on in your world. Would you mind for the audience and everybody telling us just a little bit about yourself? How you been? Where are you coming from?
Yeah, so I'm in Hudson, New Hampshire. I might as well just say Nashua because half the time nobody knows this town at all. But yeah, so my background essentially, went to Holy Cross College in Worcester, Mass. So if there's anybody there from there, hi. Um, so put myself through law school working in a call center. And I knew I just had to go from college straight to law school and get it done. And I did. And I passed the bar the first time around and practiced bankruptcy, real estate. Ended up making my way into the telecommunications industry. So I was working on those modifications to the cell towers, collaborating with the construction teams and the engineering teams, got to learn kind of how to read all those construction drawings, mount analysis, structure analysis. So I think that being in that environment, where we're working on 4G, 5G, really got me interested in learning more about tech.
Hmm.
And, during COVID, started really seeing a lot of lawyers talking about legal tech tools and, being in the corporate space and overseeing these multi-million dollar projects for a billion-dollar company. We use a lot of technology tools, but we didn't have the fancy labels that we have now, right? Like now it's like, oh, wait a minute, what's that? I've used that. I've been using that. So then from there, I just, kind of really went from the legal tech space and more off the emerging technology because I felt like that was the umbrella, right? Yeah, lawyers need to use tools, but then we have these technological advancements that are happening. So it's
Hmm.
beyond lawyers learning how to use like a contract lifecycle management tool, for example. Now we got to worry about your clients and the tools that they're using and the potential risks for cybersecurity, data privacy, all the fun stuff that we're
Hmm.
going to talk about. But the other thing I am is also an advocate for inclusion in the tech sector, and we'll talk more about that. And right now, I'm the current Chief Operating Officer at DI Directive, where we're really focused on leveraging technology, specifically data analytics for equal employment, um, compliance, as well as just trying to help organizations diminish litigation that could potentially come from, especially with AI hiring tools,
Hmm.
bias and discrimination from those. So yeah,
Oh,
little short. We'll be here all day if I really told you everything I did, and I don't think we have the time for that.
I was going to say as you're saying things, I'm like these are like spawning more and more questions in my head. But I'm good. I want to I'm going to keep this on the rails. folks, how have you been? Shala, Sean, Roger, what have you guys been up to? It's been a little bit since we've talked.
I'll go. The first thing that comes
Yeah.
to mind is if anyone saw, speaking of AI and diversity, of course, I shared my little video where I was trying to create graphics with ChatGPT,
Yes.
and I had to like tell it what I was looking for. So yeah, I think this will be an interesting conversation for sure.
Did you come out the wrong skin color? What? So I can't wait to
Yep.
hear.
Meaning for the wrong gender.
Oh, actually, that's happened to me. So yeah, I can relate.
So I was trying to make that clever little for the audience. I was playing with a sketch. I took the picture and with Flo's permission, I said, "Hey, would you mind if I took your image and used DALL-E to turn it into like an AI robot lady?" And she said, "Sure, go ahead." And I have to say, as a white man, I never took my picture and I gave it to an AI and said do something with it, and it just completely flat out got it wrong. The first, I want to say 6 tries, I uploaded the picture and I tried multiple engines. I tried DALL-E, I tried Midjourney, I did try the free version of Canva. I don't know if the paid version is any better, but yeah, every single time the first shot, it always came back as a white woman in a print dress. It got the print dress right, and it got the hand on the hip right, and it got the smile right, but it completely flubbed on the ethnicity. And I was like, and every time I corrected it, I was like, no, this is a white woman. The picture is a picture of a black woman. Obviously, it would say, oh, I'm very, very sorry. We strive to do inclusive. Blah. It just gave me a long apology. and then it was, I was like, man, it took a lot longer than I thought it would to get a decent picture out of that. I don't know where I was going with that. Charlotte, what about your story?
So it was the same thing. I was just live streaming like I do, and it was perfect because I had some of my favorite people in the audience where I'm just trying to create artwork for a workshop I was working on. And it yeah, it was just like I had to literally spell out like this is what I'm looking for. And then we got closer, but then I had some other things I pointed out where we can get into that. But yeah, and so the first thing that comes across for me that I'm interested in is, yeah, you being an advocate for diversity and inclusion because that's me as well. So yes, I'm excited to get into the topic.
Sean, Roger, Sean, sorry, I'm getting so excited. I'm just like naming everybody's names at the same time. Sean, what is
Roger,
it? What is
Sean,
it?
Roger.
Would you like to learn tonight, or questions that you have for literally our first lawyer on vBrownBag? No, and no binding legal advice. We understand.
I think this is a very, this topic's top of mind for a lot of people, right? Just sort of the implications of AI, from copyright to bias to all kinds of like safety, right? Trying to think of the name of it. I can't remember. I know OpenAI published something called like the ChatGPT system card. And it was this PDF document that has it was like a report basically. And it was just like, hey, here's what our model did before we put on guardrails. And here's what it was after guardrails. And it was like, wow, some of the questions that were answered or asked and some of the responses were, eyebrow raising, right? Like, I can't believe it. So, but then you think like, okay, well, they're releasing it publicly. What about everybody else who's just developing models that aren't held to that standard because they're not in the light, right? They're not in the limelight. So like, what are the implications of that? So yeah. I'm super excited. I look forward to diving into this.
Well, I myself, hi, I'm Roger, and I myself am looking forward to hearing a lot about, regulatory compliance. Where you see the different positions of the frameworks, where you see them going in the future, as well as things like data privacy and, of course, security. So,
Yeah, so we'll skip Roger's question. So make sure you just bypass right by Roger.
okay,
Sean had
okay,
great. I like what Sean was saying.
nice. Oh, Sean, I found that ChatGPT system card. I posted it online for everyone, for anyone who's interested in looking at the system card and going through the different things like hallucination, harmful content, privacy, cybersecurity, etc.
Yeah,
Nice.
and I love how that we, seeing the term hallucination. It's like that polite way of saying lies. But we had to put the more like nicer terminology.
Yeah, politically correct. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
When
And then that's the
something makes
question,
more than
too, right?
100.
If somebody goes ahead and like, let's say I ask ChatGPT, because it happens all the time. I ask ChatGPT like, "Hey, help me write this code," and it's like, "Hey, use this function." And it's like that thing doesn't exist. Oh, I'm sorry. Blah blah blah. Right? It does the absolute positive. Absolutely, you can do this. Use this function, and then it's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Use this." But then the question, I kind of think of it like self-driving cars. I guess I'm kind of steering back to Roger's question though with liability, because like
Yeah.
if somebody gets into a car accident, is that the car's fault or is that the driver's fault?
Ooh.
And it's like if somebody uses code generated by an AI, is that the code's fault or the business fault that owns the model, or is that my fault for not being smart and checking it before I just put it into a production system, right? So
Yeah, I mean, and what you asking, I think can lead into, what happened with the lawyer who used Chat GPT, and ended up, submitting, court documents where the other side is reviewing and is saying, like, Your Honor, these cases that are
Don't
referenced in
exist.
here don't exist, right? So
oh, I never heard about
that was
that.
a great example of what happens when you're not vetting, the system, right? Because one of the things with Chat
Mhm.
GPT, it's really not telling you where it's getting the information, right? Unless if you're using the paid version, then you have all these plugins and you can probably, better trace where the information come from. But for those who are frugal, and using the freemium, it's not coming with, notations of this came from this site and this, so it is really on the user
Right.
uh, to really vet the information that is being produced. And that whole case with the lawyer who used Chat GPT ended up sparking a debate from lawyers saying Chat
Mhm.
GPT is not legal research, right?
Mhm.
If lawyers want to, do research and use tools that help them with, litigation, e-discovery, contract negotiations, contract drafting, then they should be using legal tech tools, right? That have legal data that is from factual existing case law. So this lawyer actually, everybody, all eyes was on this, because most people are like, oh my God, what's going to happen to him? Is he going to get in trouble with the bar? Is it going to
Mm.
be disbarred? What are the consequences? And I believe it was him and his partner both got like a $5,000 disciplinary fee, right? Which I think is really modest, right? Because the expectations were this was going to be more grandiose, but the discipline was actually more of a slap in the wrist. But then it also triggered the need for, and we already have probably about the last time I checked, 40 states now. So lawyers, when you're practicing, you have this, you got to take continuing education. And part of the continuing education is also like the ethical standards, right? Continuing education is part of that. And part of that now is technology, being
Mhm.
tech competent. So now it kind of brought in this whole, well, we've got to, as it is, I always tell people, because I always have family members want to ask me legal advice, and I'm always like, well, I don't want to give you legal advice, because then something happens, I'm held at a higher standard,
Windows.
because
Mhm.
I'm a licensed attorney.
Right.
I'm not going to be held at a standard of a layperson who went and used Google to find you legal advice, right? So lawyers already held at a higher standard. I think now what we're seeing with all these emerging technologies, especially artificial intelligence, is the push for lawyers to be technology competent, really be more aware of the tools that they are using and the potential, especially with ChatGPT. Are you taking a client's personal information and dumping it into ChatGPT to draft your contracts or do any legal work? Well, that's a problem, especially where we know if you don't have the training option off, it's going to take your data and then it's going to train the model on it. Now your client's information is on there. And we're already seeing issues with companies whose source codes have been exposed on ChatGPT. So yeah, it's just one of those things where user beware, right? You got to be a little bit more, use a little bit more due diligence.
Mhm.
And because we have this exposure now to some of the things that are happening, I'm also interested to see as we move further along, is it going to be those little $5,000 fee, or is it going to be like, whoa, wait a minute, been here, done that. Now the discipline is going to be at a, harsher mark than what, we saw.
Well, I can
So
see that being larger, especially for in high profile cases, where the lawyer exposes information about their client online, and then now, of course, it may sway the jury as far as the decision that they make for that particular case. But I'm kind of curious from your standpoint. You mentioned lawyers need to be more tech savvy and understand these particular things. In which way do you think that they should actually go as far as that's concerned? Because normally lawyers just rely on the tech persons to provide them that technology. Are you saying that they need to be just as savvy, if not a little bit more savvy?
Yeah, so with a lot of the states that are adopting the tech competence as
Mhm.
part of the requirement for your credits for continuing education, your CLEs, tech competence is one of them. It falls under the ethical standards, the ethical duties. Lawyers have these ethical duties that we have to abide by. So I think what it is essentially is the tools that we use as lawyers. We've got to understand the ramifications, especially in terms of protecting the clients, right? Great example is contract lifecycle management tools. A lot of lawyers are starting to use this contract lifecycle management tools. A lot of them also have the AI component so that they could be able to kind of use the AI for predictive analysis, essentially like understanding contracts that have better terms, right? Understanding contracts that are money makers, revenue generators, understanding contracts that are like, we might not want to sign that again, as well as understanding bandwidth for the legal department, right? How long is Flo taking to negotiate this contract? Whoa, Flo is taking like 20 days compared to our other lawyers who were taking 24 hours, right? But the thing with CLM tools is an article that came out in law.com is that these tools are a data hub. And because they're a data hub, you have your client's information. Some of it can be really sensitive information. So, something as simple as how are you, or what measures are you putting in step to protect your client's privacy because you're using this technology. So, I think it's a two part. It's the tools that we use, right? As well as if we're providing advice to our clients, right? We also have to know some of the basics. If a client is sending me stuff in an email, oh, hey, here's my social security number, and you can use this bank account to go ahead and pay yourself, and it's going through email, something as simple as that is, well, you know, is it secure? Your client just sent you. So, so minor things like that where you're taking steps to not only be proficient in the tools that you're using, but understand some of the basics, of how you can protect your client. Or if you're in the tech sector, right? Uh, Technology lawyers, um, you're going to need to understand, some of the complexities, especially with regulation, or maybe you're in the employment lawyer and your clients are using HR hiring tools that have AI,
Mm.
right? So it's all you've got to really understand, and we're seeing it. AI is impacting all industries.
Mm.
So it's unless you're going to live in a cave, it's really difficult as a lawyer to not see the impact. And being able, whether your client is in the hospitality industry, AI is being used in the real estate industry, like knowing just some of the basics. I mean, I'm not saying lawyers need to go learn how to code, right? But you've got to learn some of the basic and the potential consequences so you can be able to advise your clients. Hey, yeah, you're using that AI real estate tool. What data are you collecting? What
Mhm.
state is this in? Because then now you got to think about, data privacy laws. Oh, hey, are your clients in the EU, by the way? Because the
Yeah.
EU has, they got their own, laws. So things like that where you've got to be proficient in understanding the potential impact. And the other thing is, you might have a client who might be compliant in New York, but New York's law is different from California. And then now they're compliant in New York, but they're not compliant in California. Right. So all those complexities is why lawyers who now, it's a lot more work to ensure you're understanding the impact of technology to better serve your clients. I said a
And you,
lot.
and you said you didn't want to talk about data
I
privacy.
know. Look at that. You
Come on, come
got me.
on.
Roger's a smooth talker. He can get everybody talking. He's amazing. So, when we last spoke at the seminar, we had talked about the ramifications of AI and copyright, and at that time things were very nebulous. And has anything changed on that front, or is it still all
Yeah.
up in the air right now?
So there's been so many lawsuits, I can't even keep up.
Yeah.
There's so many that are going on. There's some where some you know, s- some parts of the lawsuit have been dismissed, and some are moving forward. But I think all eyes right now, because I get asked this a lot, like, well, who owns, what the AI, the output, who owns it? And I hate to give the lawyer answer, but the lawyer answer is typically it depends, right? Because there are so many AI tools on the market. They all have different terms of and conditions that are different in terms of what your rights are to the output, and your ability to copyright or not. And right now the Copyright Office has essentially said if it's AI produced, you can't copyright it. It's got to be a human, right? So right now what the defense is saying is fair use, right? They're saying, hey, we can use a lot of right, because I think, well, I guess let me back up, right? Because a lot of the people who have bought cases are people who are claiming copyright infringement.
Hmm.
There's
Hmm.
some cases that have been dropped because the people who have claimed copyright infringement did not actually copyright some of the work, right? They did not go register and copyright their work. So that's
Oops.
why those portions of the lawsuit were dismissed. And the
Mm.
ones that were able to move forward was because they had a copyright protection, right? So the court was like, hey, if you want copyright protection, you should have gone through the process.
Right.
What we're waiting to see now is the verdict to that case. And if that plaintiff is going to be able to, and again, there's many plaintiffs. So if any one of those plaintiffs out there right now, if they're going to be able to prove infringement, copyright infringement, Or is the defense going to say, this is fair use? And fair use essentially says, hey, I'm able to use something that's copyrighted without getting permission from the person if it falls under, maybe it's a parody, maybe it's for educational purposes, maybe I'm quoting Oprah when she said XYZ, for example, maybe it's for news story. So there are certain exceptions to being able, and again, limited. It's not like, cut and paste the whole thing and now I'm, essentially using someone's original work as my own.
Right.
So to make a long story short, right now it's all up in the air.
Mm.
What some people are saying, Microsoft recently partnered up with the Associated Press, and the Associated Press is given essentially license right to Microsoft to be able to take some of their licensed material and use it, right? But Microsoft has deep pockets, right? So they can pay the license fees to use those copyrighted works, as part of their AI platform. But what some people are saying, what about the small startup companies
Right.
that don't have those deep pockets where they can go license with every single artist? But then the same question is like, well, but what about the artists? Like, they want to get paid too. Like Chat GPT is making all these millions of dollars. I want a piece of the pie. So
Mhm.
the ultimate question here is this fair use? Right? Is it fair use to use these copywritten pieces from artists and use it to train AI models? And that's what we're waiting to see, because the decision has not been made yet. But that decision could impact how AI tech companies move forward, because they rely on, those training datas.
Mm.
But if now there are these ramifications of copyright infringement, how do they move forward? Right? What does that future of AI and tech look like? Right. So that is the number one question, which I cannot answer for you today because the case
Right.
has not
Right.
been solved.
Well, it seems funny. So when you say the words fair use, we in the creator space know that means that we can only use X number of seconds of a song in a YouTube video before we get clipped. But these training models, they were trained on the entire book, it read the entire PDF so it read all of the copies of all the Stephen King books. And now it knows the style of Stephen King. So when you say, hey, write me a short story in the flavor of Stephen King, it knows that because it read all the books.
Right.
So it's interesting because it's basically doing exactly what a human does insofar as I can read a bunch of Stephen King novels, I can kind of feel the vibe for it, and then I can create a truly new and unique piece of content that is in the flavor of Stephen King, but it seems like it's much more closely tied and much more nefarious somehow when a machine does it that can then crank out 1,500 stories in 2 seconds, and then flood. I don't know. It feels like it's different, and I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot, to your point. There's a lot of unknowns right now that we're still trying to wade through, and
Yeah.
I think the interesting scenario too is what happens once the AI starts consuming its own content and then creating content based off of its content. And we're probably just talking about LLMs right now, but what about, I mean, it's producing video and music too. So at some point, the other day I asked ChatGPT, like, pretend you're two developers and you're creating an app, and it just started having a conversation with itself. And it's like, okay, who owns that now, right?
that's how you get Skynet, Sean. That's how
So
you get Skynet.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, I don't think anybody knows that right now. Right. So look at this scenario. Amazon, Kindle, they started getting inundated with people using Chat GPT to write books. They actually ended up having to put a cap on how many books could be essentially uploaded in a day. And then they also had to come up with some guidelines that you had to differentiate between AI generated and AI assist, right? And
Mm,
you had to mark which one was which, right? And they said AI generated is something where you just said, hey, write me a book about a dog that likes to eat hot dogs. Right. So now the AI is the one creating the book, and, you know, it wrote it. And there's a difference between me writing a book about the dog that likes a hot dog and then, dumping the story into Chat GPT and saying, hey, I suck at spelling, clear this up, catch
Mm,
spelling mistakes, make sure it makes sense, right?
right.
Now that's AI assist. But how can you differentiate between AI generated and AI assist? Because if I'm doing this on, Amazon can't tell unless right, honor system, I'm like, oh my God, I gotta tell Amazon the truth, you know, hey, Amazon, I wrote, I didn't write this. This was AI generated. How many people are really going to be truthful
beautiful.
and say
Zero.
this is AI generated versus AI assist?
Mm,
And to your point, that's what some of the human authors, because now we use the term human, we call ourselves humans now. Um, the human authors were like, hey, I'm seeing my books on Amazon, but they're like, have this weird now kind of AI enhanced storyline. Like, what's going on? So that's what we have right now to deal with. And I don't think anyone, so Amazon has not prohibited AI generated books for
mm,
now. They're
yeah.
still allowing them to be created and published. What they're just saying is, well, you've got to self report. But how is self report really going to work out?
So I have a curious question, and I actually posted it inside about the role of lawyers and policymakers in the future of AI governance. But what would you like to see be the role of policymakers? What would you like to see them do better to
Yeah.
improve, the legislation around AI?
I mean, that's a fantastic question. Honestly, right now, we have what we call a puzzle piece of laws that are just popping up in different states. We don't have a standard uniform law. There's all these different bills that are being submitted. We have states like New York, Illinois,
Mm,
California that are, saying, okay, well, here's our AI law. So that causes confusion, as I mentioned earlier,
mm,
where I might have a client who in New York, they've got to do ABC, but in California, they got to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K,
Mm,
right? So now you've got to, as a lawyer, you got to keep up with all the different laws and all the things that are being, again, just because something is proposed doesn't mean that it's going to be enacted. So now you've got to be watching what's being proposed and what's actually being enacted. So what I would love to see is something where, I don't know, we just have one thing. Hey, across the board, here's how we're going to handle AI when it comes to hiring tools, right? Here's how we're going to handle AI when it comes to, I think, Sean, you mentioned, if one of these self-driving cars hit someone, here's the ramifications. Here's what we're going to do with deep fake, right? And how AI gets used, and during, by politicians and so on and so on. So if we have something more uniform, hopefully, uh, it'll be easier to regulate. It'll be easier to implement. But then again, some people will say, well, we have don't drink and drive laws, but people still go drink and drive. You know, and
Hmm.
some states have seatbelt laws, and some people still get in the car and they don't put on their seatbelts. So yes, ideally having something that's more structured, more uniform, more has accountability. Like if you don't do this, here are the consequences. Versus, oh, you this is mandatory. If you choose to, follow this AI regulation, then okay, cool beans. Yeah, but again, I think the implementation of that regulation and the consequences that will be imposed when people fail to follow, that's the part that I think might be a struggle.
Yeah. I, for one, certainly hope we never see a case where somebody goes drunk, gets into the car, self-driving car, no seatbelt, and is driving the car, and he's sitting in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
Car has an accident, and he's sitting there going, "Well, I wasn't driving."
Right. And that's the thing. What happens in that scenario
Mhm.
when he goes and, hey, Super Bowl, his team won, gets into one of those self-driving cars, and he's not driving, but it gets in a car accident, but then he's drunk. So, yeah, who's at fault? The car, him? I mean, it brings up a whole, yeah.
I'll add one more thing. So, in doing some research for this particular for this webinar, I saw that there are so many different legislations out there: Toronto, Beijing, United GDPR, and then of course, California has their own
Yeah.
CCPA or
Sissy,
something like
yeah.
that, right? So there's so many. I can't imagine being an international lawyer with AI and having to keep track of all of that. Plus, not to mention all the ones that are going to be different for each of the different states. In the
Right.
United States. I mean, that
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure that'll be you go crazy after a while. So I totally agree. There should be some standard where it's straight across the board. It's a standard that can be used not only in our country but in the countries abroad, and it's the default for everything. Here, this is what's going to happen if this happens. If you use something and discriminate against somebody for hiring practices using AI, this is what's going to happen. So I'm hoping that we get to that point, but I just see that even in some of the I actually watched one of the legislations where they were actually sitting there talking to Congress, but they went so back and forth that they never came to a
Mhm.
resolution. They never came to something that said, okay, you know what? We all agree on this, because there were so many different avenues that
Yeah.
by the time they were done, they had actually talked themselves out of
Yeah.
going through with it.
Yeah.
Listen, we'll come back next year. We'll talk about it
Right.
again.
Yeah, talk about it never. And that's the problem is when you go into one door, it's going to reveal other things. You're like, oh, damn, I didn't even think about that. Right. But I think if you look at the EU, for example, even with the GDPR, I mean, they really protect their citizens' data privacy. I mean, they're like, listen, we're not playing around with our citizens and their information. Right. Whereas, with us, I feel like over here, at this point it's like who doesn't have our information, right?
Mhm.
I mean, I'm just like right now, like earlier I was just getting all these PayPal, here's your access code. I'm like I did not request that access code. I don't know who's trying to hack
Whoa.
into my PayPal account. I'm not
Hmm.
responding, right? And then one question I always ask people sometimes when I do presentations is, how many people take the time to read those little pop-up cookie notifications
Mhm.
before they hit, I consent. And
Mhm.
most of the time, literally, like 95% of the room would be like, "Oh, I don't read that stuff. I just hit consent." So that's the thing. We've now gotten to a point where we're so used to our privacy being violated.
Hmm.
It is like the norm now, right? So I guess the better question will be, do citizens even really care in the first place? Right?
This is
Yeah.
true.
about all these risks, right? Because some people are like, listen, I don't care. Um, I'm making money off Chat GPT. I'm using it for my marketing and
Mhm.
content creation. I don't care about the consequences. So there's some people who the consequences are not, the bar is not going to be high. But I think for, again, what I talked about earlier, for other professionals, where it is their job to protect their clients information and customers information, especially if it's an organization that is international, that's not only doing business in the US, but like you mentioned, they're doing business in China and the EU. They need to be well equipped to ensure that they're in compliance, right? Because there are some countries that have the mentality of F around and find out, we're going to come after you and implement all these, fines,
Mm.
right? And we've seen companies like Meta, Google, Amazon get like these ridiculous fines. Um, but if you're a small business owner, for example, that's
Mm.
the tricky part. You're a little small business owner, but you're international. Um, that's where it gets tricky, because the legal fees, like you mentioned, of trying to keep up with everything going on in different countries is going to be difficult, but you almost don't have a choice.
Nice.
You've got to comply.
Mhm. And a lot of those different frameworks, they do have provisions for opting in, opting out, for your data. But then there's that element where if you have data and there was a breach, there's a protocol
Mm-hmm.
for breached data, right? And so of course they send a letter home, hey, your data's in breach, we'll give you consumer protection for 2 years or something, we'll pay for it. But the thing about it is, with AI now, it's a lot different. Your data isn't just there for from a breach factor. It's being used again for other things. So now, what is the ramification, or what is the liability for a person whose data gets breached, as it pertains to those particular companies?
Yeah, so I mean, and that's the thing, forget the cookie consents I just talked about. A lot of people, when they go use these AI tools, they're not reading the terms and conditions.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So every tool is going to be different, right? And when you talk about data privacy laws, where we don't have a uniform data privacy laws. It's, again, it's the puzzle pieces. States are kind of like, okay, well, we're just going to come up with our own. And that's the thing, is when there is a breach, states have different notification processes. Right. So some
Mhm.
state might say you've got to notify your clients, or you got to notify the people impacted within, 10 days. Another state might say the requirement is 5 days. Another state might say the requirement is, not only do you have to contact your customers, you got to contact the attorney general's office.
Right.
So that's why it's important, where there's going to have to be an alignment between the AI regulation as well as data privacy laws. Right? Because with AI, it's collecting the data, and unless you're opting out, it's using your data to train the system. But then, like you said, what happens when there's a breach? And and again, what law is going to determine, the notification process? So I
Mm.
think the biggest thing right now is, with everything going on, especially with the Biden administration, having now all like selected about, 31 tech hubs in the country, New Hampshire being one of them.
Oh, yeah.
We have all this push to be innovative, to this competition to be a global technology leader. But with it, with all this innovation that's coming out, one thing that's missing, and that's gonna continue to be a discussion, is that what we just talked about. How are we at the same time, whether this is an innovation that has to do with the healthcare industry, which has HIPAA, and other regulation and compliance, how are we going to ensure that where it's a balance, right?
Yeah.
But how are we going to ensure that balance between the com- the innovation and the harm to the citizens, right? Or to the people of
Humans.
this country, to
The
humans. Yes,
humans.
let's go back to the human term. We're humans, right?
I think you just actually answered the question that I was going to tee
Exactly.
up. Is AI technology progressing so quickly that it will be hard to set a precedent for anything useful before the tech outpaces? I mean, how are you familiar with how that process happens? Is that is
Which
how
process?
has the establishment of precedent and legal precedent for things like this is
Yeah.
I, tech is speeding up, has gone at a velocity that it seems vastly outstrips politics and the creation of laws and things like that. How do we get a political system that takes decades to create a new law to regulate a technology that literally 8 months ago wasn't even a blip on our radar?
Yeah, I mean, we can't even get our politicians to sit down and talk to each other in a room. So, I
Right.
mean, I don't even know how to answer that question.
Yeah, probably a very unfair question.
Right now we're so focused on how can we, divide and not get things done. Yeah. So so I think if we focus more on coming together and figuring
Mhm.
out like, hey, yeah, we want to be a global technology leader, right? Innovation brings revenue and economic growth for our country, for our states. Innovation, increases workforce demands, right? And with all these tech layoffs that are happening, a lot of people will welcome that. People want jobs, people want to work, people want good paying jobs, especially right here in our state in New Hampshire, where our pay is tends to be significantly lower than Massachusetts. That's why, unfortunately, we lose tech talent because they cross the border. I don't think so a lot of people are saying 2024 is going to be the year of the regulation. um I don't know. It's really hard to tell right now. I think that copyright, infringement cases that are pending, all eyes are on those to see, what happens with that. But I can tell you right now, with being a tech startup founder and being around other tech startup companies, most people are just creating. They're just like, how can we create this, and how can we scale, and how can we get an investor?
Mhm.
Very few are saying, how can we create this and make it ethical and good?
Mhm.
They're just like,
Right.
we need to be number one. How can we do this
Mhm.
fast, right? That's the mindset of the tech industry. It's about, you know what? We'll apologize later, right? Let's
That
just
part.
get this right. Let's just get this stuff out the door, and you know, we'll apologize when things happen.
That's literally exactly what OpenAI did. They scanned every
Mhm.
single book in every single library, and then afterwards was like, "Oops, sorry, our bad."
Yeah, yeah.
But
But then
here's
what has
this cool
happened?
product.
Yeah, and now what's the evaluation? Like over $1 billion,
Right.
right? So that's the thing, is they're making money, and the
Mhm.
money is making money for their investors, Microsoft and other people. So and then now let's look at, you brought up OpenAI. Right now, OpenAI and Microsoft now have if you're a user and there's a copyright infringement case for, because you used our platform, we will pay your legal fees,
Right.
right? But these guys have deep pockets. A
Mhm.
smaller company, you know, that ends up having users complaining that, hey, that I'm getting sued because, I use your platform. They're not going to be able to pay everybody's legal fees. They can't even pay their own legal fees, let alone offer to pay other people's legal fees. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, right? And then let's just think about the insurance aspects, right?
Mhm.
When you have a car insurance, you get into a
Mhm.
car accident, what happens? Next thing you know,
Yep.
your car
Mhm.
insurance goes up. So that's the thing, is what's going to happen with the insurance policies for some of these companies, right? We know
Mhm.
with companies, when there's a cybersecurity breach, and because there is an increase in cybersecurity breach, we're seeing an increase in cybersecurity insurance. So what's going to happen with all these AI infringement cases and the insurance companies, so that's something else that some people might not even be thinking about is the impact on the insurance industry with all these technological advancements and the risks that are coming out as a result of.
That's a good point. I wasn't thinking about that.
Yeah, most people are not.
Wow.
So I did want, I mean, we've only got a couple of minutes left, and I did want to touch back on some of the bias and discrimination stuff that we talked about at the very beginning. How can the legal system address the issues of bias and discrimination in AI, especially in critical areas like hiring practices and criminal sentencing? Is there any thought around that from the legal perspective?
Yeah, so definitely, with the hiring tools, like a great example would be New York and a couple of other states that kind of passed their own laws in terms of, companies that are using this automated, employee tracking or hiring systems. And New York came out and said, "Listen, if you're going to be using AI hiring tools, then you're going to make sure you audit these tools every year, every 12 months. You audit these tools to assess any potential bias and discrimination." Um, However, just recently this week, um, so it's like, okay, so these companies, we're going to do the audits and then they're going to release the data on the audits. Well, I think there were about like 180-ish companies, and maybe only, like, according to the Washington Post, I believe like only like 18 actually published audits. So now people are like, wait a
10%.
minute.
What are you hiding?
Mm-hmm.
So is this law like not tough enough? Is this not strict? Is it, what's going on? And now what are going to be the consequences for these companies that are not compliant? Now, the Equal Employment Office Commission uh, essentially said, listen, if you're going to be using HR tools, and there's, if for hiring, whatever, employee tracking, facial recognition. Now, again, that's another different thing. Some states won't, they don't want you to use the facial recognition or facial stuff for hiring. So again, to your point, Roger, every state has their own little different, regulations. But the EOC said, we're coming after you, plain and simple. So what can organizations do? You need to already be tracking and assessing and be intentional about your own hiring practices, right? And for me, and especially at DI Directive, we're about data analytics, people analytics. Know who you're hiring, understand the makeup of your organization from top to bottom. What does it look like, right? Because if everybody's looking the same, then maybe you want to assess, is there a potential bias in your AI tool where it's only selecting candidates that look like only A, and we don't want candidates that look like B. And the EEOC already settled a lawsuit with a company that was discriminating against workers that were 40 plus.
Mm-hmm.
So they were intentionally saying, we don't want, the elderly workers, right? I believe IBM, with the layoffs, again, with the tech layoffs, I believe IBM is in a lawsuit right now where older employees, I should say more mature employees, are saying that they're the first to go. So maybe, again, they're using an AI tool to, filter and find the older employees, and they're getting, the layoffs first. So yeah, so there's many concerns right now that are popping up, but I can tell you that employment laws exist. So if you're going to use the AI hiring tool and there's bias and discrimination, the EOC is coming after you, and they've made it very clear that you cannot say, hey, I'm just a user, I'm not the person who created the platform.
Mm.
That defense is not going to work for you.
Good. So,
Yeah.
so they were using an AI tool, and even with that, it was disproportionately getting rid of the older employees. Is that what I heard? Or
Yeah. So what they essentially have done, it seems like there was an intentional,
Hmm.
right, intentional training of the tool to
Mm,
single out candidates that had a specific birth date.
got it. So they
Holy
like
crap!
straight up told the tool,
Wow.
like,
Yeah. There's
X
another
this out.
case going on right now. There's another. Look it up. I believe it's Anthem, one of the big health insurance companies. It's probably going to be. Some people are saying it might be a $1 billion class action suit. So what they were doing is they trained the AI to override doctors' orders. So if a patient needed additional care, like they needed to go to, um, a nursing home or a facility, what they would do is cap how much money they would spend on that patient who's on Medicare or Medicaid. And once that person has reached that cap of what they want to pay, if the doctor says no, this patient still needs additional insurance or additional care, they would cap and override doctor's orders and say, no, they don't. They're fine. So the families
Wow.
of these patients have now sued, saying we've had to pay out of pocket for you know health insurance bills that you, the insurance company, could have paid for, should have paid for, but you use the
Mm.
AI system to essentially override doctor's order for your own financial benefit.
So
Yeah,
I guess
it was United
oh,
Health. Face it,
It
United
was
Health
United
faces
Health.
lawsuit.
Okay, sorry,
Yeah,
Anthem. It wasn't you guys. Okay.
so
not
I
this time.
guess like I guess one thing I have is how does it even come out like, oh, well, this was happening because we're using this AI tool.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think what it is it comes down to the investigations that happen. Sometimes you have whistleblowers. I mean,
Whistleblowers.
look at Amazon.
Mm,
Amazon
yeah.
Yeah.
had whistleblowers that were saying, listen, Amazon has this new tool and it is, high risk of releasing customer data, can be compromised. So sometimes you have internal people who are, anonymously, I mean, just look at when people are looking for jobs. You've heard the platform Fishbowl?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So now it's like if you want to find out, let's say you want to find out what's going on in the company, and they're saying, "Oh, we're like, everybody's like lovely here, and we're kumbaya roasting marshmallows in the fireplace." You really want to know what's going on? You go to Fishbowl, and
Yep.
Fishbowl will tell you, "Hell no, don't come here. Okay, don't come here. We're suffering."
Yes. That used to be Glassdoor at one point, but now it's
It's
Fishbowl.
Fishbowl because it's anonymous, or you get an offer, right? You get an offer, and they're saying, hey, no, everybody makes 80,000, and you want to verify. You can go on Fishbowl and people be like, nope, we're getting paid 150. They're trying to rob you. Run. So yeah, I mean, I think that's what usually happens with a lot of these cases where we find out things happen. It's usually a whistleblower, right?
Mm, okay.
Hmm.
Yeah. All this is like super interesting to me because I am someone who's always joking but serious about Skynet is here. I used to say it was coming, but now I'm just like it's
It's
here.
here. Yeah.
And it's just interesting to see how things go. One thing that's always top of my mind is because someone will come to me and be like, "Oh, I'm using Chat GPT to do this and that or whatever, Bard, whatever AI tool," and it always makes me nervous because sometimes I'm like, "What are you putting into that thing?" I'm like, "Are you
Yeah.
being careful not to like leak data?" So it's
Yeah.
I love the tools, but it's also scary.
Yeah, like don't put in your tax information in there, or
That's
hey,
what
do
I'm
my
saying.
taxes. Yeah, I mean,
People
you
are
just have
putting
to
their
be
name in
careful.
there.
Yeah, and this is where, it's really important, and there are organizations out there, and I love this, even nonprofit organizations out there, especially the elderly community, that are taking the time to educate them on some of these tools. And even with cybersecurity and stuff like that, because, now with AI too, let's just look at like when you look at spam emails and spam calls, those robocalls. Now with AI, they could send us like 100 calls, in a shorter time period, and they can send out more emails and text messages in a shorter time period. Like I literally had somebody send me a text message and they had my name and everything. And I was like, oh, hey girl. And then they sent me a photo and I was like, I don't know this person. I was like, they're like, yeah, remember? They were like, remember you said you're going to donate money to the orphanage? I'm like, no, I didn't. It wasn't me. I need the money donation. I'm not donating to something.
Opt out, opt out, opt out.
Yeah. This is the world we live in, and some people say they welcome the dark lords, the robos,
Oh,
the
yeah.
robots, and AI. They're ready to worship, and some people are like, I don't think so.
All right. Well, there are 1,000 more questions that we could ask you, but we are at time right now. Flo, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm gonna. Is there anything that you want to give a shout out for? Or are you in the process of writing a book right now that you want to plug? I mean, normally the engineers that we have on have like a repository. Obviously, you don't. Is there anything that you want to talk about or direct our listeners to pay attention to?
No, I mean, definitely for any organizations out there that need help staying compliant with the EOC and, need that digital platform that helps them do that, especially if you're in New York and you have these audits that you got to do, definitely let me know. We're here to support with our digital platform, which, helps organizations track their hiring trends. So no need to be on the EOC naughty list when there's help.
Right. So we'll put your contact information and links into the show notes so that folks will be able to reach out to you for that and more AI legal advice in the future.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much for coming on. Super appreciate it. And I enjoyed meeting you in real life before getting you on the show here. And there's 1,000 more questions, but we're going to stop now.
Yeah, we can always do it. But I just want to know what Roger was looking at. Or maybe maybe Roger looks up when he's thinking.
Oh, so I every time I do a lot of research. So as you're typing, I talk about research, and then I look for links to be able to send to our guests. So,
okay, so you have a
He's got a monitor.
Monitor, yes, it's just a monitor up here.
Oh,
yeah.
okay, got
I
it.
took a picture of him one time when he was looking up, and I sent it to him.
I didn't know if it was a fly or something. Maybe Roger's been attacked in his house by a fly. I don't know.
AI.
He's been waiting to get raptured for a while now, so he's like, "Is that you, God?"
Nice. All right. Well, thanks, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and go do my skincare and get him in bed.
Thank you for staying up so late for us.
I know.
Have a wonderful evening, and everybody else, we will see you again next week. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.